Okay, let's dive right into this. Today in this explainer, we're unpacking a really fascinating photo essay from 2002 by photographer and professor Choi Won-Jin. The piece is called Changing Eyes, and we're going to explore exactly what that title means. We're going to look at how our everyday assumptions, the things we just completely take for granted, can be entirely reframed. It's this brilliant exploration of how our perceptions shift over time, evolving from something as simple as the clothes we wear all the way up to our complex views on global politics. So, let's start with a really relatable observation. Think about watching old movies. Have you ever sat down to watch a classic Korean film, or honestly, any movie from just a decade or two ago, and suddenly noticed something visually off? The actors and actresses who were once considered the absolute pinnacle of glamour suddenly look, well, kind of outdated and ordinary. It's a completely universal experience. But Choi Won-Jin points out that this phenomenon actually reveals something deeply profound about how we humans actually see the world.
See, fashion and hairstyles don't just transform because new clothes are being manufactured. They transform because our eyes literally change over time. Think about how something we once automatically categorized in our brains as the height of elegance eventually gets refiled as old-fashioned. It's not the physical image itself that changed, right? It's the human lens through which we view it. Our perception is not a static camera. It's way more like constantly updating software.
Take hair dye, for example. Back in the day when young people started rocking really bold, vibrant hair colors, it drew massive criticism from older generations. It was seen as rebellious, maybe even totally inappropriate. But fast forward to today, those exact same vibrant hair colors are confidently worn by middle-aged and elderly people everywhere. This visual transformation proves that we are dealing with an ongoing cultural adaptation. It isn't just the passive passage of time. It's our collective eyes actively getting used to a brand new normal.
Section 1. Context shapes our eyes.
So we've talked about how time shifts our view, but what happens when we literally change our physical location? Choi shares this brilliant personal story about this exact thing. Years ago, a friend of his brought a Korean-made car back to Korea from the US, and it was painted in this unusual color specifically made for the export market. Now, in Korea, Choi thought it looked totally out of place. He even questioned his friend's taste. But later, when Choi visited the United States himself, his doubts completely vanished. He realized that exact same color harmonized perfectly with the American landscape. It didn't look strange at all. It belonged. The car didn't magically change color, the backdrop did.
The crucial takeaway here is this. I clearly realize that our sense of beauty is never absolute. Our eyes are constantly adapting to our surroundings, and that means what feels incredibly unfamiliar or even unappealing to us today might be deeply beautiful tomorrow simply because the context around us changes. Beauty is highly conditional.
Section 2. Cultural codes of beauty.
Let's expand this idea of shifting context and look at the deeply rooted beauty standards of entirely different cultures. When we see indigenous peoples featured in documentaries, their standards of physical beauty often differ remarkably from our own. And Choi argues we absolutely cannot dismiss this as some simple contrast between civilized and uncivilized societies. That is a deeply flawed framework. Instead, every single culture has an accumulated understanding of beauty based on generations of totally unique experiences. The essay argues that we have to stop forcing a single standard of beauty that's primarily based on economic power. We really need to recognize independent aesthetic values as entirely legitimate on their own terms.
Choi really hits the nail on the head here, writing, "Every culture possesses its own accumulated understanding of beauty, shaped through generations of experience." This means beauty is a complex cultural code. It is absolutely not a universal hierarchy dictated by whoever has the biggest economy or the most global influence. Our aesthetic values are learned, they're practiced, and they're handed down. They are fundamentally relative to our distinct cultural experiences.
But here's the real kicker. It's not just our sense of beauty that shifts. This is where Choi takes a really sharp, fascinating pivot in his essay. We are stepping out of the relatively low-stakes world of fashion and car paint, and we are moving straight into the high-stakes world of global philosophy and international relations.
Section 3. From aesthetics to geopolitics.
We are scaling up now to explore the author's specific observations from January 2002 regarding the actions of powerful nations. He notes his own profound unease observing a country, one that was once admired globally as a champion of justice, now acting as if it were the sole arrogant leader of the entire world. He argues that national self-interest was being actively disguised as the pursuit of peace, and that human judgment was becoming dangerously distorted by these geopolitical agendas. Now remember, we are objectively unpacking Choi's historical arguments from 2002 here, looking at how he takes the relativity of visual perception and applies it directly to global events.
And this brilliantly illustrates Choi's overarching thesis, the concept of the warped lens. This is how national self-interest, presented in the name of peace and justice, can completely distort human judgment. Just as the physical environment of the U.S. distorted Choi's view of a car's color, national interest and propaganda can heavily distort our view of international justice. We might think we are seeing objective truth, but we are actually looking through a warped lens constructed from our own cultural and national biases.
Section 4. The Relativity of Truth. Earlier in his essay, Choi noted how some communities were rapidly abandoning their traditional beauty standards to imitate Western fashion. Well, he connects that visual adaptation to a much broader realization. If our aesthetics can be swapped out that easily, our deepest moral values are likely just as relative. Think about Hollywood war films. To one audience, the soldiers on screen are celebrated as noble liberators. That's the lens they look through. But depending on whose eyes are actually watching, those exact same figures might be seen as symbols of provocation and violence by people in other nations. It's the exact same film, the exact same sequence of events, but interpreted completely differently based on the cultural, historical, and geopolitical context of the viewer.
Which leaves us with a profoundly challenging question. Are our ideas of justice, morality, and truth any more permanent than our changing sense of beauty? I mean, if our eyes can so easily change how we view a hairstyle, a car color, or an old movie star, shouldn't we be critically examining the lens through which we view global justice and fundamental truth? It's an incredible concept to leave you with today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning what you see and maybe more importantly, how you see it.